7 years had elapsed since the young hounds first arrived at the Baskerville training grounds. Today, they confronted a formidable beast resembling a horned bear. As the creature charged at them, the young hounds took turns striking it with their swords. Observing from the sidelines was Staffordshire Baskerville, the instructor of the young hounds and a member of the Baskerville clan's Shadow Hound. Understanding the challenge of facing a stronger opponent, he shouted out instructions, advising them to target the monster's hind leg to impede its movement rather than aiming for its vital points right away. The triplets among the young hounds worked together effectively, draining the monster's strength. Staffordshire was impressed, noting that their dark crimson aura was well suited for the Baskerville lineage. After the triplets had weakened the beast, the other young hounds joined in and finished it off. Staffordshire applauded their efforts, congratulating them on becoming low-rank sword experts and masters of the first Baskerville technique. He reminded them that they were up against a caged beast, emphasizing that the wild ox bear on Le Rouge at Lenoir Mountain would present a completely different challenge. He cautioned them that death could come more easily than they anticipated, and they needed to rely on their bloodline or gain experience to survive. With that, the instructor wrapped up the 7 years of training, congratulating the young hounds on their graduation and wishing them the best in their future pursuits. After successfully completing their training, the young hounds began chatting amongst themselves. Two of them discussed their preferences for the various knight orders within the Baskerville clan. The first hound expressed his preference for the Wolfhound order, while the second shared his favorites Doberman, Pitbull, and Rottweiler. There were 7 knight orders in the Baskerville clan, each established to fulfill different roles, including reconnaissance, protection, assassination, suppression, and full-scale combat. Suddenly, the first hound asked his friend where he thought that Jerk would end up. The second hound, puzzled, inquired who he was talking about. The first hound clarified that he meant the person seated on the dead ox bear Vicar. They continued discussing Vicar, with one hound mentioning that he had defeated a much larger ox bear than the one they had just faced, and that he was already a high-rank sword expert, having mastered the third Baskerville technique, placing him at the same level as the Shadow Hound. Vicar sat atop the slain ox bear, deep in thought. He realized that reaching his current level of graduate intermediate rank at the 5th Baskerville technique had taken longer than he had expected. Although his swordsmanship had significantly improved, he felt his progress was slower than he desired. At that moment, head butler Barrymore appeared behind Vicar, addressing him as Master Vicar. The butler informed him that the Patriarch was looking for him and that his assignment had been decided. With a serious expression, Vicar simply replied, "Understood." Vicar entered the Patriarch's office and greeted Hugo, who responded with a grunt. Noticing a cut on Hugo's nose, Vicar asked how it had happened. Hugo explained that he had been subduing barbarians on Le Rouge at Lenoir Mountain when one of the archers had managed to injure him. Vicar inquired if he had captured them, but Hugo replied that he had not. However, he did manage to inflict a similar scar on the archer's face. After a brief pause, Hugo congratulated Vicar on his graduation, though his tone turned ominous as he added that the challenges were only going to increase from here. Vicar pondered whether Hugo was about to discuss his assignment while reflecting on his past before his regression. He had served as a junior knight in the Pitbull Order, sent to the perilous Le Rouge at Lenoir Mountain to face constant death for 21 months. Treated like an expendable mutt, he was thrust into battle immediately upon arrival. He recalled that Baskerville children were divided into 2 categories: elite or expendable. Once they turned 15, the expendables were sent to perish in combat, while the elite received an education in politics and administration. Through countless near-death experiences, the seasoned expendables eventually became guards for the elite, who matured over time by studying politics and governance. Vicar understood that the 5th Baskerville technique was designed to help the elite catch up with the expendables' extensive hours and experiences in real combat. However, he had been unable to advance beyond the 4th technique before his regression. There was no way Hugo, the one in charge, would allow him, as an illegitimate child, to take a course meant for the elite. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted by Hugo. Hugo suggested that Vicar consider the lower house of Parliament. Not entirely clear on what Hugo meant, Vicar asked for clarification. Hugo explained that the lower house of parliament supported the Baskerville clan's regional administration, legislation, and law enforcement, as well as facilitating businesses and overseeing the region as needed. In simple terms, they managed both minor and significant affairs for the clan. Vicar was taken aback that Hugo had chosen him, an illegitimate child, for the elite course. Hugo went on to explain that Vicar's accomplishments surpassed those of any child deemed a genius by a decade. Therefore, he would regard Vicar as such. The position Vicar would assume was that of Deputy Consul of Underdog City. Currently, both the consul and deputy consul roles were unfilled, and Hugo asked if Vicar was interested in the opportunity. After weighing Hugo's offer, Vicar decided to accept the role of deputy consul of Underdog City. However, before moving forward, he wanted to address an incident involving the Mord clan and the Ruby Mines. Hugo seemed already aware and mentioned how Vicar had screwed over Adolf Mord. Vicar confirmed this and requested to borrow his reward for a time. While Vicar did not reveal exactly what he wanted to borrow, the head butler, who had an inkling, was taken aback by Vicar's audacious request. Nevertheless, Hugo appeared unfazed. He stamped the document and assured Vicar that he trusted him not to act recklessly. With newfound confidence, Vicar promised he wouldn't give Hugo cause for concern. Yet, he found it ought to be called son by Hugo, something that would have seemed impossible before his regression. As the head butler and Vicar walked down the corridor, the butler spoke earnestly, stressing the patriarch's high regard for Vicar, highlighted by his appointment as consul before being sent into battle. He referred to this as the disciplines of kingship, implying that Vicar was being prepared for greater responsibilities in the future. However, Vicar wasn't taking his new role lightly. He recognized that success wasn't guaranteed and that he needed to work diligently to fulfill his duties as deputy consul. He thought to himself that this was an opportunity to refine his skills in a safer environment. Although he wasn't particularly interested in current affairs, the memories from his past life remained vivid. He recalled the chilling experience of his head being severed from his body by the guillotine. At that moment, Vicar resolved that he would one day make Hugo Le Baskerville feel that same sensation. In the Baskerville territory, specifically in Underdog City, a bald man was giving instructions to the workers in a large villa. He directed them to ensure the place was spotless by the next day, as a new deputy consul from the Baskerville family was set to arrive. The workers acknowledged his orders, responding, "Yes, sir." Later, one of the workers pondered what kind of person the new deputy consul would be and hoped he had some business experience. The other worker pointed out that the new deputy consul was only 15 years old. As they were chatting, a young boy approached the villa. The second worker noticed him, placed a hand on the child's shoulder, and inquired whose child he was, wondering if any staff member had brought him along. He then told the boy he couldn't just enter the villa without permission. To the worker's surprise, the young boy was none other than Vicar. With an annoyed expression, Vicar commanded the worker to take his hand off his shoulder. He then produced a document and showed it to the worker, revealing it to be the official verification of his position as the new deputy consul. The workers were left stunned and confused as to why he had arrived a day early, but Vicar remained unfazed. Instead, he instructed them to prepare food and drinks for a party he intended to host. As Vicar entered the villa, both workers exchanged bewildered glances, unsure why the new deputy consul would want to throw a party on his first day. Soon enough, the celebration began, filling the villa with food, drinks, and nobles who mingled and enjoyed the festivities. Meanwhile, Chihuahua Baskerville, the general secretary of Underdog City, was pacing anxiously in his office. He looked out the window, incredulous to see the new deputy consul who had just started throwing a party at the workplace. Chihuahua was already under stress, as his predecessors had been ousted for accepting bribes, and now here was Vicar, drinking and celebrating on the job. The nerve of this young troublemaker seemed almost too much for Chihuahua to handle. Just as he was about to express his frustration, Vicar suddenly appeared behind him, causing Chihuahua to nearly jump out of his skin. Vicar introduced himself as Vicar Van Baskerville, the new deputy consul. Still shaken, Chihuahua introduced himself in return, and Vicar noted that he didn't have a middle name. Chihuahua braced himself internally, aware that not having a middle name marked him as an outsider and employee rather than a true member of the Baskerville family. He had faced discrimination from past deputy consuls because of this and was accustomed to being looked down upon. To his surprise, instead of ridiculing him, Vickers simply placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Nice." This unexpected gesture left Chihuahua confused. Vickers explained that he had reviewed Chihuahua's background during his journey and noted that he was a native of Underdog City. Chihuahua confirmed this, stating he was born and raised there. Vickers acknowledged this and told Chihuahua that he understood how hard people like him had to work. He assured him that he had no intention of interfering with his job. Although still somewhat bewildered, Chihuahua responded with a hesitant, "Okay." Inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that this might be a new form of harassment. Chihuahua also wondered why Vickers was in his office, especially since he had been the one to request the party. However, Vickers shifted the conversation to a different topic. He explained that while there wasn't anything fundamentally wrong with the personal law system, the city's judicial system had many peculiar issues. He elaborated that one of the major problems in Underdog City was the immense success of many illegal business owners, which had given the underground more influence than the law itself. Vickers concluded that simply shutting down illegal businesses wouldn't address the underlying problems. The heads of the underground businesses needed to be eliminated. As the newly appointed deputy consul, Vickers explained that his role was to create and enforce laws. While he respected the existing regulations, he intended to introduce a new one. Chihuahua, surprised by the mention of a new law, listened closely as Vickers confidently stated he would dismantle the underground economy within a week. However, he needed a valid reason to create and implement this law. Chihuahua was puzzled about why Vickers required a reason to shut down illegal businesses. Vickers clarified that, as a young and newly appointed deputy consul, he needed a performance to make his actions credible. Although Chihuahua still found the plan difficult to understand, Vickers' expression changed to a sly grin as he looked out the window and proclaimed, "To put it differently, I will lay out poop for the flies." Chihuahua couldn't help but wonder what he meant by that. The next day, Vickers arrived at Doorsmile Street in downtown Underdog, where a large crowd had gathered, buzzing with conversation. Vickers stood on a stage holding a stake, while Chihuahua and his companions speculated about the deputy consul's intentions. They noticed the large turnout and commented on Vickers' early arrival. Vickers stepped forward and introduced himself as the new deputy consul. The crowd reacted with surprise, taken aback by the sight of such a young man in that position. Some murmured that he was cute, while others questioned his abilities. Vickers disregarded their doubts and addressed them directly, saying, "I believe you have all seen this notice. These laws have been in effect for some time. Even though the deputy consul has changed, the laws of the Baskerville family remain strict and will continue to be enforced." Despite Vickers' confident words, skepticism lingered in the crowd as they muttered doubts about his capability to uphold the law at such a young age. Some even speculated that he might soon fall victim to the same corruption that afflicted those in higher positions. Unable to remain silent, Chihuahua shouted at the crowd, demanding they show respect for the new deputy consul. While the crowd quieted, a few still whispered that perhaps Chihuahua would be a better choice for the role. In a surprising turn of events, Vickers' actions left the crowd in shock. He lifted the stake, and a hush fell over the assembly, all eyes fixed on him. With remarkable strength, he plunged the stake into the ground, causing the earth to tremble. The crowd could hardly believe their eyes, astonished by this display of power. Seizing the moment, Vickers made an unexpected announcement. He declared that he would establish a special law under his authority as deputy consul, known as the Vickers Special Law. This law would reward anyone who could pull the stake from the ground with a staggering sum of 100 million gold coins. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they processed the news. 100 million, they shouted in disbelief. The crowd gathered closer, eyes darting between Vickers and the stake, trying to comprehend what was happening. Vickers clarified the new law, the first law, known as the Vickers Special Law. Paragraph 1, Article 1, states that whoever pulls out the appointed stake, henceforth referred to as the stake, will be paid 100 million gold immediately by me, The crowd was stunned, exclaiming in shock at the thought of receiving such a massive amount of money for simply pulling out a stake. Questions erupted from the crowd, with one person daring to ask if it could really be that easy. Whispers of disbelief spread like wildfire, yet even with the excitement in the air, no one stepped forward to attempt the challenge. Noticing their hesitation, Vicar raised his voice again, asking, "Is there no one who wants to claim 100 million gold?" When no one stepped forward to pull the stake, Vicar surprised the crowd again by declaring a new law. The Vicar Special Law, Paragraph 1, Article 2, stated that whoever could pull the stake would receive an astonishing 1 billion gold coins directly from Vicar. The offer was too tempting to ignore, yet it was met with skepticism. A fat old man in the crowd laughed bitterly, accusing Vicar of mocking them and questioning who would attempt such an impossible task. The crowd murmured in agreement, though some began to reconsider the prospect of 1 billion gold was hard to dismiss. Chihuahua, standing behind Vicar, grew increasingly uneasy as the crowd's disbelief mounted. He wondered why they were being subjected to such embarrassment. Vicar, however, remained unfazed and asked again if no one was brave enough to claim the fortune. With no one stepping up, Vicar raised the stakes even higher, offering a staggering 10 billion gold coins. This announcement stunned the crowd into silence. Some questioned whether it was a joke, while others were tempted by the promise of immense riches. Yet, a few cautious voices warned about the deputy consul's sword, advising restraint to avoid appearing overly greedy. Still, no one dared to step forward. At that moment, Chihuahua whispered to Vicar, informing him that there wasn't enough gold in the entire city to cover such an outrageous promise. Vicar remained unfazed, and just as he was about to speak again, a small hand shot up from the crowd. The hand belonged to a little girl with a flower basket, who timidly asked if she could try. Her voice was so soft that the crowd barely heard her, but the old man standing beside her, recognizing her as Judy the flower girl, tried to stop her. Judy, determined, explained that her mother was sick and she needed to do something to help. Despite the old man's warnings, Judy approached the stake. She hesitated for a moment, her heart racing with fear. Vicar watched her intently, his expression unreadable. As Judy reached the stake, she thought of her sick mother, and without saying a word, Vicar calmly instructed her, "Pull it out." His tone was steady, leaving Judy uncertain about what would happen next. Taking a deep breath, Judy gripped the stake tightly with both hands and pulled with all her might. To her astonishment, the stake came out effortlessly, as if it had never been stuck in the ground at all. The crowd gasped in disbelief, watching in awe as this frail, small girl succeeded where grown men had hesitated. Judy glanced nervously at Vicar, who had been observing her closely. Her heart sank as he made a motion, seeming to unsheath his sword. Tears welled up in her eyes as fear washed over her, thinking of her mother and what would happen if she were gone. However, instead of drawing his sword, Vicar knelt before her and held out a bag filled with gold. "For now, here is 100 million gold," he said, handing it to her. The crowd was in utter shock, and even Judy could hardly believe what she was seeing. Vicar then asked her where she lived, explaining that the full 10 billion gold would be too heavy for her to carry. He promised to have it delivered to her home with a personal guard for her safety. Still clutching the bag, Judy stared at him in disbelief, barely able to comprehend what was happening. Gently placing a hand on her head, Vicar reassured her, "This is the law. It must always be obeyed." The crowd behind them remained speechless, and even Chihuahua, who had been at Vicar's side throughout the performance, was left in stunned silence, his mouth agape. No one had expected the young deputy consul to fulfill such an extraordinary promise. Vicar's actions had a profound impact, making the Vicar Special Law more renowned than any previous laws of the Baskerville clan. The simplicity of being rewarded for obeying the law and punished for disobeying it resonated deeply with the citizens. As word spread, Vicar gained a reputation for being a man of his word, a rare quality that earned him immense respect. The effects were immediate. Crime rates dropped significantly, and lawlessness was halved. Even Chihuahua, moved by Vicar's leadership, admitted that for the first time in his 20 years of service, he felt genuinely inspired. Vicar explained that ruling through fear alone wasn't sufficient. Earning the trust of the people required creativity and conviction. Reflecting on his performance, Vicar couldn't help but compare his methods to the harsh reign of Khemu Morg, who, years later, would reduce crime rates to 1% but at the cost of being feared and disliked by her people. As Vicar and Chihuahua returned to the office, Vicar studied a map of the city, marking locations where criminal activity thrived. He explained that confiscating the ill-gotten gains from these groups would help recover the 10 billion gold payout. When Chihuahua inquired how he knew where these underground businesses were, Vicar tapped his nose with a smirk and replied, "I can smell them." The atmosphere in the VVIP lounge of the Burning Suspension was thick with arrogance and self-indulgence. Members of the Youth Autonomy Association reveled in their excesses, exchanging crude jokes, flaunting their wealth, and ridiculing their perceived enemies. The blonde ringleader leaned back smugly, discussing the Baskervilles as if they were mere tools at their disposal. "The Baskervilles? Those sword-waving idiots don't even realize they're being played," he scoffed. "Remember how we pinned everything on the Mesamod in our clan? Those fools slaughtered their own loyal dogs, and we didn't have to lift a finger." His companions chuckled in agreement, their laughter echoing off the opulent walls of the lounge. One of them raised his glass, toasting to their continued success as the conversation shifted to the new deputy consul. "Vicar, has anyone even heard of this Vicar?" the blonde asked dismissively. "Van Descent or not, he's probably just another clueless bureaucrat." The others shook their heads, clearly uninterested in the details of the city's new leadership. But the blonde had other ideas. His smirk widened as he proposed a plan to deal with Vicar. "Let's give him a warm welcome," he said, sarcasm dripping from his voice. "We'll invite him to one of our little parties. Best drinks, the most beautiful women. Let him indulge himself, and once the party's over, we'll make sure he pays for it. The poor fool won't know what hit him." Laughter erupted among his companions, excited by the prospect of humiliating the new deputy consul. As they discussed their plan, a waiter entered the room with several girls, announcing their arrival. The blond man and his companions looked up excitedly, eager to enjoy their evening with the ladies. One of the men noticed a young male accompanying the women and questioned his presence. The waiter, unaware of who he was, explained that the boy entered with such confidence that no one questioned him. The young male was none other than Vicar. The waiter grabbed Vicar by the hair and, in an angry tone, demanded to know why he was there. However, Vicar's eyes glowed with anger, and suddenly the room fell silent as the group looked on with shocked expressions. As Vicar approached, the waiter realized his arm was bent at an unnatural angle, causing him to shout in pain. One of the men, who had initially pointed out Vicar, expressed his surprise at the sight. Vicar introduced himself as Vicar van Baskerville. The man repeated his name, recognizing him as the deputy consul, and questioned why he was there. Vicar simply replied that they had invited him. The blond man realized the situation was escalating and, trying to calm things down, laughed and exclaimed how amazing it was that Vicar had come to the party. Vicar watched the blond man whisper to one of his companions, discussing something. The blond man asked if they should carry out their plans, and his companion agreed, suggesting they see how Vicar dealt with paying for everything. The blond man agreed and proposed keeping Vicar there to force him to pay once the party was over. Vicar had had enough. He placed his hand on the table, interrupting their conversation, and demanded they stop the pointless chatter. Suddenly, the entire table exploded, sending glasses filled with drinks crashing to the floor, causing everyone in the room to look on in surprise. As the drinks spilled, the blond man watched in disbelief. His thoughts immediately went to Vicar's potential abilities. Could he have used mono-manipulation to make the champagne tower explode just by touching the table? The blond man realized Vicar was a graduator. His companion was equally shocked and whispered in anger, noting they had thought Vicar was just a 15-year-old kid. The blond man snapped back, telling his companion that, as a middle-class expert, he should do something. But the companion was too scared, knowing they would lose in an instant if they tried to fight Vicar. Suddenly, Vicar placed his hand on one of the men's shoulders and addressed him directly. The man, terrified, blurted out that they were planning to pay for the drinks. Vicar questioned whether they had been planning to force him to pay for everything, and the man realized he had made a huge mistake. Another companion spoke up, asking who would dare to do such a thing. The blonde man tried to calm the situation, claiming they only wanted to test Vicar, as Underdog City had become corrupt. They wanted to ensure that Vicar wouldn't be enticed by the city's temptations. The blonde man's companion agreed, saying Vicar seemed to have what it took to lead them, and that they would be sure to follow. Suddenly, Vicar attacked the man sitting closest to him with a palm strike that resembled a claw attack. He grabbed the man's stomach tightly and delivered a stern message: an owner can test their dog, but a dog should never test their owner, no matter the situation. As Vicar looked at the rest of the group, he questioned whether they were moved by his actions because of their money and power. He warned them that they had never seen anything truly frightening before. Vicar threw the man to the ground and stepped on his face. He then looked at the rest of the group and asked if they knew why he had done this. If they didn't, it seemed they would meet the same fate. The blonde man, stricken with fear, stammered a response, claiming they knew exactly why Vicar had acted as he did. But Vicar kicked the man's head and told them that if they really understood, they would know what he was going to do next. The group became angry at this, and the blonde man called Vicar a bastard, while another questioned if he really thought he could get away with it. Suddenly, Vicar appeared right in front of the second man and accused the group of committing crimes such as abduction, kidnapping, illegal slave trafficking, and insulting the Baskerville name. The rest of the group looked shocked upon hearing their crimes being named. Vicar then punched the second man and told them, "Animals don't learn until you teach them." With an evil grin, Vicar said he was prepared to teach the disobedient creatures a lesson. The dimly lit prison cell echoed with the blonde man's furious threats, his beaten face twisted in rage. Vicar raised an eyebrow, as if surprised by the question. "Do you think I overdid it?" he asked. "Yes," Chihuahua replied, incredulity flooding his voice. He struggled to comprehend how someone could inflict such serious injuries on another human being, likening the victim to a meat bag. Vicar, however, remained unfazed. He walked toward the cell with a cold smile on his face, assuring Chihuahua that he hadn't even begun to show his true power. The older man looked shocked and disbelieving, demanding to know what Vicar was planning. "I'm going to execute all the wicked civil servants who have morphed into a grotesque organization," Vicar declared, his tone unwavering. He claimed he could see their arrogance and ignorance in their expressions, the result of a lack of proper education and a blatant disregard for the authority of the Baskerville clan. Chihuahua still couldn't grasp the gravity of Vicar's intentions. "Are you serious?" he pressed, searching Vicar's face for any hint of doubt. Vicar nodded firmly, and in the cell, the blonde man and his companions were now begging for their lives, promising to give Vicar everything they had if he spared them. Chihuahua's concern deepened. "But do you realize what will happen after this? The families of those you execute won't just sit idly by. They're cowardly yet daring, and they'll resort to any means to avenge their loved ones." Vicar's confident smile remained intact. "There's no need to worrying about the families of the executed men. These corrupt officials are tied to the criminal organizations of Underdog City. Their families won't have the luxury of complaining." Chihuahua, however, expressed concern about the evidence against these officials. Vicar responded confidently, assuring him that he had his ways of finding it. If necessary, he thought to himself, he would create his own evidence. Vicar appeared indifferent to the chaos that would follow his actions. He believed a significant change was on the horizon, and he would likely soon be thrust into battle. Regardless, he knew he would have to leave this place once he enrolled at the academy. Standing before the prisoners, Vicar's eyes were cold and unfeeling as he surveyed them. He began to list their crimes, his voice flat and monotone. Human trafficking, kidnapping, bribery, blackmail, threatening, assault through a third party, and murder. The blonde man immediately denied any involvement, demanding evidence to support Vicar's claims. Vicar merely smirked. "Would you accept punishment if there were evidence?" At this, the blonde man's defiance faltered. He looked down, guilt etched across his face, as if he were silently confessing, "I'll never bring shame to my family, even if I were to die here." Suddenly, a man appeared, striding toward Vicar with a bag in hand. The bald-headed man called out to him, and Vicar turned around, and fazed by his presence. The bald man set the bag down before Vicar and informed him that his custom order was ready. Vicar expressed his gratitude for the timely delivery, to which the bald man merely chuckled in response. Vicar opened the bag, revealing an assortment of tools, which he began to arrange carefully on a cloth. As he set up, the bald man suddenly spoke up, remarking that he had never seen some of these tools before, despite having tortured people for 30 years. "How did you come up with such terrifying instruments?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. Vicar shrugged, replying, "I didn't invent them. They're common where I come from." The bald man was taken aback, eyes widening. "You mean you come from hell?" Vicar chuckled softly. "Something like that." He then asked the bald man if he would like to learn. The bald man quickly declined, saying he might vomit everything he had eaten if he witnessed Vicar at work with those tools. Vicar merely nodded, his gaze drifting back to his equipment, lost in thought. He longed for the days of the era of destruction, when even the Demon Clan's prisoners would spill their secrets under torture. Those times had refined torture methods significantly. With a deliberate motion, Vicar opened his coat to reveal his tools, causing the blond man to squeal in fear. Vicar turned to the prisoners, asking where their bravado had gone, the same bravado they had displayed when claiming they would never confess. He tightened the buttons on his wrists, smirking as he said, "Please don't say anything. I want to cherish the memories of my past for once." The blond man, unable to contain his fear, burst into tears. Rumors of the arrest of the 7 wicked gangs spread rapidly throughout Underdog City. Wherever 3 or more citizens gathered, the tale continued to circulate, igniting both fear and intrigue among the populace. In a nearby tavern, patrons buzzed with conversation about the recent arrests. The charges against those 7 suggest execution might be on the table. This statement sent a ripple of unease through the crowd, igniting a heated debate about whether the children of native families could truly be put to death. One patron insisted that the new deputy consul had a reputation for ruthlessness, recalling a story about him burning 10 billion gold with a single stake. "He's not one to be trifled with," he said, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and admiration. Yet another voice countered, "Executing them would put him in a tight spot. The backlash would be immense." The citizens of Underdog City speculated that the arrest of the 7 notorious gang leaders was merely a political maneuver between the new deputy consul and the native authorities. Many believed that once the local powerhouses exerted their influence, the situation would blow over, and the imprisoned gang members would be released unscathed. As expected, the Mant Blanc clan, Pure clan, Luovi clan, Channel clan, Ferragamu clan, Hermes clan, and Pradar clan delivered their apologies to the new deputy consul. However, events took a shocking turn. The heads of the 7 gang leaders were displayed in the center square, preserved in salt and frozen in expressions of agony, as if they had endured excruciating pain until their last breath. Above their gruesome display, a public notice detailed the punishments inflicted upon them prior to their executions. The crowd stood in shock as they read the notice and beheld the gruesome scene before them. In his office, Vicar explained that there was no reason for surprise. The laws had long been established. However, this was the first time that the notorious native families would face such consequences. He believed this would herald significant change and predicted that once the destruction of either party commenced, Underdog City would descend into a bloodbath. Turning to Chihuahua, Vicar warned him to prepare himself, as he would be joining him in the next phase of their strategy. Chihuahua was visibly shocked and taken aback by Vicar's words. The scene shifted, and he now stood in the same pose, a mask concealing his face. Turning slightly, he whispered to the occupant inside the cage, none other than the deputy consul, questioning if this was truly the right strategy. Vicar simply responded, asking Chihuahua if he didn't trust him. As Chihuahua lingered in doubt, the area began to fill with masked figures. The atmosphere was charged with tension as slaves were paraded through, their hands shackled in iron cuffs. Amid the chaos, Chihuahua's thoughts drifted back to Vicar, who sat quietly in one of the slave cages. He pondered whether having the deputy consul sold as a slave was indeed a sound strategy. Underdog City, notorious for its illicit activities, was hosting one of its darker events, a slave auction. In a remote area, a massive tent had been erected, surrounded by luxurious carriages. The products on display included kidnapped barbarians, nobles, and commoners, all waiting their fate as the highest bidder loomed. The Baskerville family remained blissfully unaware of this unlawful spectacle. The auctioneer, positioned at the front of the crowd, greeted the attendees with an enthusiastic welcome to the circus. Spotting Chihuahua's group, he smiled broadly, recognizing the distinct emblem of the Mont-Blanc clan. Upon reviewing their identification papers, he noted that they were present as sellers. Concern flashed across his face as he recalled that the Mont-Blanc clan had expressed dissatisfaction with the slaves they had purchased at the last auction. They were valued clients known for buying in bulk. Chihuahua responded that they were indeed satisfied with the quality of the slaves available at the auction. The auctioneer's gaze shifted to Vikir, who was confined in a cage, his black hair and red eyes marking him as a rare find. The auctioneer assured Chihuahua that he would take responsibility for selling Vikir at an impressive price. Chihuahua nodded in agreement, leaving the matter in the auctioneer's hands. The auctioneer bid farewell to Chihuahua Mont-Blanc, hoping he would enjoy his time at the circus. Inside the tent, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as the auctioneer took his place on the stage. The crowd murmured among themselves, some discussing the recent trend of mysterious-looking slaves, while others expressed a preference for the prettier, more attractive specimens. A few were intrigued by the tragic backstories of fallen nobles or kidnapped aristocrats, all hopeful for a day filled with quality products. With a flourish, the auctioneer introduced the first item on the agenda, a notorious case of embezzlement involving the Baskerville family's knights. He unveiled an rank monster known as the Merciel, a fearsome creature resembling a cow, said to dwell in the depths of hell and rumored to hail from another world. The auctioneer elaborated on its horrifying reputation, noting that it possessed 19 hearts and would continue its relentless assault until every one of them was defeated. He excitedly detailed the creature's potential uses, from its durable leather to its edible meat, bones, and intestines, emphasizing that nothing would go to waste in the hands of the buyers. The crowd's interest peaked as they leaned in, eager to see what price this unique offering would fetch. The bidding for the Merciel kicked off at an astonishing 100 million gold. The price quickly escalated to 140 million, then 200 million, and ultimately reached a staggering 250 million. With no further bids in sight, the auctioneer slammed the hammer down, declaring the item sold with a flourish. As the auction progressed, unique and exotic items kept the crowd on edge, eager to secure something of value amidst the dark and illicit atmosphere of the slave auction. The auctioneer, sensing the rising tension, moved swiftly to the next item on the docket. A worker leaned in and whispered something in his ear, and the auctioneer's eyes widened in surprise. "Next up, we have a truly rare item," he announced, his voice booming across the tent. A girl from the fierce barbarian warrior tribe of Balak, hailing from the treacherous Les Rouges at Lenoir mountain jungles. The girl was brought onto the stage, her demeanor fierce and defiant as she glared at the crowd. The auctioneer, eager to pique interest, encouraged the bidders to consider taming the wild slave, boasting of a chance to showcase their training prowess. He began the bidding at 5 million gold, but to his dismay, no one showed interest. The price dropped to 3 million, then 1 million, yet still, the crowd remained silent, their interest waning. Frustrated, the auctioneer ordered the guards to take the girl away, deeming her unsellable. In a desperate final attempt, the girl lunged forward, trying to break free from her captors. But a guard swiftly retaliated, delivering a brutal punch to her stomach that knocked her unconscious. With no sympathy, they dragged her backstage, her fierce spirit extinguished for the moment. The auctioneer offered an apology for the earlier mishap and promised to reveal the highlight of the event, Vikir. He introduced Vikir as a purebred with striking black hair and red eyes, noting that minimal restraint was needed. In awe of Vikir's appearance and build, a woman in the crowd immediately offered 600 million gold, without even waiting for the initial bid to be announced. The auctioneer chuckled at her impatience. However, a man soon countered with an 800 million gold bid, which infuriated the woman. She questioned why a man would be interested in Vicar, and he coldly responded that it wasn't her concern. He planned to make Vicar a gladiator. The bidding continued to escalate, with another offer of 900 million. But a mysterious figure, holding placard number 99, stunned the crowd by raising the bid to a staggering 6 billion gold. Whispers filled the room as everyone realized it was Baron Gambino, a wealthy figure from the granary, known for his vast fortune, especially after his recent dealings underground. The Baron's assistant hesitated, expressing concern about the enormous bid, warning that profit would only come if Vicar remained unharmed. The Baron, clearly irritated, reminded her of her position, recounting how he had given her shelter when she had no other options. The auctioneer announced that the masked figure, customer 99, had won the bid. As Vicar was brought before Baron Gambino, the Baron inspected him closely, clearly satisfied with his purchase. He addressed Vicar, claiming ownership, and attempted to reassure him that he wasn't a bad person. However, the Baron's unsettling tone, paired with hints about the fun they would have together, made Vicar uneasy. In a sudden move, Vicar raised his hands in front of the Baron. Confused, the Baron asked if Vicar wanted his handcuffs removed. But before the Baron could respond, Vicar easily snapped the cuffs apart, shocking both the Baron and his assistant. Wasting no time, Vicar delivered a powerful kick, sending the Baron crashing to the floor. He then grabbed the Baron by the back, suggesting they play a game called Spear and Shield. As Vicar tightened his grip, he calmly explained that he would be the spear, and if the Baron, as the shield, could withstand his attack, he'd win. The Baron cried out in pain, desperately calling for Cindy's help. But before she could react, he had already passed out. Vicar glanced down at the unconscious Baron and calmly declared that since the Baron had fainted, it meant he had won the game. He then removed the fake hair he had been wearing, revealing his true identity: Vicar van Baskerville. Cindy Windy, the Baron's assistant, immediately recognized him and gasped, calling out his name. Vicar, however, paid her no mind, turning instead to check if the Baron was still alive. The crowd was left in shock, murmuring about Vicar's appearance and speculating who would become the next deputy consul of the underdog city. Some questioned why a Baskerville hound would show up at an event like this. Meanwhile, hidden among the crowd, Chihuahua observed how the deputy consul had just turned this whole situation into a spectacle. Surveying the onlookers, Vicar remarked that circus was a fitting name for this place. With a sinister glint in his eyes and a dark smile, he warned the crowd that none of them should expect to leave in one piece. Standing unarmed in the center of the auction hall, Vicar was surrounded by guards, with tension thick in the air as the crowd watched anxiously. The auctioneer, clearly furious with how things had escalated, ordered the guards to kill Vicar, disregarding his status as deputy consul. As the guards charged forward, Vicar summoned Beelzebub, his sword effortlessly cutting through them. A cold dread gripped the auctioneer as Vicar's ominous red aura filled the room, making it clear he was no ordinary man. One guard, swinging a metal ball on a chain, rushed at Vicar, but Vicar swiftly closed the gap, slicing through both the weapon and the guard with ease. The auctioneer's thoughts raced, struggling to grasp the reality of the situation. He couldn't believe that Vicar was a graduator, especially at such a young age. Graduators were the ultimate powerhouses of any nation, and the auctioneer knew they stood no chance against someone like Vicar. Chihuahua, watching the events unfold, spoke up, expressing his amazement at the deputy consul's impressive swordsmanship. But a sudden shift in the atmosphere caught his attention. Vicar heard laughter behind him and turned to see the auctioneer, now holding a knife to Chihuahua's throat. The auctioneer demanded that Vicar drop his weapon and surrender, threatening to kill Chihuahua if he refused. Vicar, however, remained unfazed, standing his ground, which only made the auctioneer more frantic. Despite the blade at his throat, Chihuahua reassured Vicar that he was fine, urging him to focus on his own safety. The auctioneer, angered by Chihuahua's defiance, tried to silence him, but Chihuahua's loyalty to Vicar stayed unshaken. Vicar chuckled at Chihuahua's words, impressed by his dedication. He then revealed that he had a trump card from the patriarch, Hugo, producing a small flute attached to his leg. Vicar confused the auctioneer, who demanded to know what he planned to do with it. Chihuahua, however, immediately recognized the flute's significance, while the auctioneer, gripped with uncertainty, struggled to comprehend what was about to unfold. Holding the flute firmly, Vicar stepped forward before the crowd. Without hesitation, he brought it to his lips and blew with full force. A sharp, deafening sound reverberated through the room, causing the crowd to cry out in agony as they frantically covered their ears, trying to escape the intense noise. As the piercing sound persisted, Vicar's expression grew colder. This wasn't just a loud note, it was a declaration of chaos, a clear signal that he was ready to reclaim his power, no matter the cost. The air in the room shifted, leaving everyone to wonder just how far Vicar would go to establish his dominance in this twisted spectacle. When Vicar finished playing the flute, an eerie silence fell over the room as the crowd stared, struggling to grasp what had just happened. The auctioneer, regaining his nerve, chuckled and dismissed it as a scare tactic, claiming that even a graduator couldn't do any real damage here. But the mood shifted in an instant as a sword suddenly pierced the auctioneer's throat from behind. Before he could react, his head was severed clean from his body. The figure responsible stepped forward, cloaked in a hood, standing beside Chihuahua, who looked on in shock at the auctioneer's decapitated body. A nearby guard, trying to take control of the situation, demanded to know the identity of the hooded figure. Without a word, the figure flicked his sword, releasing a dense red aura that tore the guard apart with ease. The remaining guards looked on in horror, while Vicar stood back, a satisfied smirk crossing his face as the chaos unfolded. Suddenly, more hooded figures appeared throughout the room, each radiating a powerful presence that drained the courage from those around them. One trembling guard stammered as he tried to guess who they were, while another desperately hoped his fears were wrong. Amidst the crowd, Cindy Windy spotted the teeth symbol on their chests and gasped, recognizing them as the Empire's most feared Knight Order, the Annihilation Experts. It dawned on Cindy, all 100 knights were graduators, part of the notorious Pitbull Knight Order from the Baskerville clan. Just then, one of the knights appeared behind her, sword drawn, ready to strike her down. Panic surged through her, she couldn't face dying like this. But before the knight could act, Vicar stepped in, commanding him to spare her. The knight immediately backed off, kneeling in submission to Vicar. With a firm tone, Vicar issued his next order. The knight was to slaughter the rest of the crowd, sparing only those who lay down without resisting. Anyone who made a move would be executed on the spot. The knight acknowledged Vicar's command before vanishing to carry out the gruesome task. Vicar felt a wave of satisfaction. Securing the loyalty of the Pitbull Knights had been critical, especially with Hugo's obsession over military strength. This was the reward Vicar had sought before coming to the Underdog City. As the screams of the dying echoed around them, a terrified man lying on the ground tried to stay perfectly still, hoping to survive the massacre. Suddenly, a Pitbull Knight loomed over him, causing the man to squeal in terror. He begged for mercy, promising to wear the cuffs and submit, but the knight replied coldly that they didn't carry cuffs. Confused, the man asked what would happen to him, only to scream in agony as the knight sliced off his legs. The knight casually remarked that those marked for execution didn't need legs. Beside Vicar stood a man with a cigar between his lips, none other than Boston Terrier Le Baskerville, commander of the Pitbull Knights. He asked Vicar if he was pleased with how the Pitbull Knights had handled the situation. Vicar nodded, and Boston Terrier offered further help if needed. As he observed Vicar, Boston Terrier thought he could see why Brother Hugo was so captivated by the young man. Even at just 15, Vicar already radiated a dangerous blend of ferocity and ruthlessness. Boston Terrier placed a hand on Vicar's head, extending an invitation to join the Pitbull Knights, promising to shape him into something even greater. Vicar paused, replying that he would consider the offer. As he turned to leave, he mentioned that there was another pressing matter he needed to attend to. Watching him walk away, Boston Terrier felt a pang of desire, his interest in Vicar growing even stronger. Vicar made his way into a dimly lit storeroom, his eyes scanning the dark corners, searching for something specific. He muttered under his breath, convinced that whatever he was looking for was hidden somewhere within these walls. As Vicar surveyed the dimly lit storeroom, his gaze landed on a large safe tucked away in the corner. For a brief moment, He considered the idea of using the noble's wealth to fund city hall taxes but quickly dismissed it. That wasn't his purpose here. Turning his back on the safe, his attention was drawn to a cage nearby covered by a cloth. A look of determination crossed his face as he reminded himself that he was searching for something far more significant. With intent, Vicar approached the cage and pulled off the cloth, revealing a battered and bruised girl inside, crying out in agony. Tears silently flowed down her cheeks as Vicar took in her injuries, which spoke of the suffering she had endured prior to her confinement. Disapprovingly clicking his tongue, he reached into his pack to grab a potion he had received from the Night Order, a stroke of luck he was now thankful for. He poured the shimmering liquid into her mouth, and almost instantly, the potion began to take effect, visibly healing her bruises and cuts. Suddenly, the girl's eyes opened, but upon seeing Vicar standing before her, fear gripped her features, causing her to recoil. Vicar frowned, taken aback by her reaction. "Why are you so shocked?" he inquired, but the girl could only stare at him, her confusion clear in her expression. Standing up, Vicar unlocked the cage door and instructed the girl in barbarian language to leave. Though she seemed to grasp his intent, and certainty lingered in her expression, her eyes wide with fear. Recalling his previous interactions with barbarians, Vicar gestured towards the exit and repeated his command, this time with greater urgency. She murmured something in her own language, but Vicar shook his head, acknowledging his limited fluency. Just before she bolted away, the barbarian girl turned back and spoke once more in her tongue. Although he couldn't understand her words, Vicar sensed that she was expressing gratitude for his kindness. With a deep sigh, Vicar revealed another cloth, uncovering the true purpose of his visit to the storeroom, the corpse of Merciel. He approached it cautiously, relieved to see it was still intact. As he examined the body, a red aura began to radiate from his hand, and Beelzebub, his loyal companion, emerged. "It's been a while since you had a meal from an rank monster," Vicar said with a grin at Beelzebub. "But don't worry, you'll have your chance soon. The Pitbull Order will be here shortly, so make sure to finish your feast quickly." Beelzebub emitted a satisfied sound, showing its eagerness for the upcoming banquet. News of Vicar's bold actions against the criminal organization swiftly spread throughout Underdog City. With the rising sun, whispers began that the nobles involved in the illicit slave auction had been captured, their limbs severed as punishment. The notorious hideout known as Burning Suspension had been reduced to ashes, its destruction a stark reminder of the rampant criminal activities. The heads of the club's VIPs were displayed prominently, raising awareness of the situation. The 7 original clans, mourning the loss of their children, submitted formal protests to the administrative office. However, Vicar remained resolute in his stance, asserting that the death penalty was the only just punishment for those implicated in the imperial family's most egregious crime, illegal slave trading. Documents including bank drafts, ledgers, and evidence of the criminals' cash transactions were seized, and the Baskerville clan was assigned to investigate the matter, intending to report their findings to the imperial family. The protests from the 7 families began to fade in light of Vicar's unwavering position. In an unprecedented move, each patriarch from the clans appeared at the administrative office, pleading with the very person responsible for the deaths of their sons. Vicar's response was direct. The black ledgers from Burning Suspension had been meticulously reviewed. Under the jurisdiction of the Baskerville Self-Governing Dominion, he announced that the assets of the 7 families would be confiscated, and on charges of treason, their lineages would face complete eradication. With the new deputy consul in place, the execution grounds were stained red with the blood of the corrupt within the city. Vicar's reputation skyrocketed among the citizens, and his popularity continued to grow each day. While sitting in his office, he was approached by Chihuahua, who cheerfully held a cup of coffee. "I brought you some coffee," he said with a smile. Vicar laughed and replied, "You don't have to bring me coffee. You're the office manager, after all." Chihuahua insisted that bringing coffee was his way of expressing gratitude for Vicar saving him from a potential stabbing during the slave auction. "You're being stingy by only offering me coffee for saving your life," Vicar joked. Chihuahua explained that he had sweetened the coffee with 2 spoons of sugar, added creamer, and mixed in a little water. Changing the subject, He inquired about Vickers' training and transcription. Vicker handed him a sheet of paper and asked for his thoughts. Chihuahua's eyes widened in astonishment at Vickers' impressive handwriting, considering he hadn't been practicing for long. Vicker modestly replied that he still had a lot to improve on and praised Chihuahua's skills as the office manager. As Chihuahua contemplated Vickers' remarkable talents, his ability to craft new laws and grasp legal complexities, he couldn't help but feel that with Vicker leading the way, Underdog City was on a path to greater success. In the dead of night, the sky was clouded, with only a few beams of moonlight breaking through, casting a faint glow into the prison cell. Vicker stood in front of a prisoner, Cindy Windy, Baron Gambino's attendant, whom he had rescued from the slave auction. Her wrists were cuffed, and a blindfold covered her eyes. "Apologies for not coming by sooner," Vicker said quietly. "I've been quite busy." He leaned in closer, trying to assess her reaction. "Is your name Cindy Windy Sunrose?" She stayed silent, her expression one of defiance. "Why did you spare my life?" she asked, her voice steady despite her situation. Vicker removed the blindfold from her eyes, exposing her scornful gaze. "I saved you because I have questions," he answered, locking eyes with her. Cindy's eyes narrowed, filled with disdain. "Is that all?" Vicker dismissed her challenge and turned away, lost in thought. "Through my investigation, I uncovered how Baron Gambino, a mere homosexual, ascended to power so rapidly. The key to his success was you, Cindy. Your ability to generate wealth." He set a chair in front of her and took a seat. "I can grant you freedom in exchange for your answers, but if you refuse, there will be consequences." Cindy's lips pressed tightly together in anger, but after a brief pause, she relented. "Fine, I'll answer if I can." Vicker scrutinized her closely. "What's your opinion on my performance as a law enforcer?" With a sarcastic smile, Cindy retorted, "A respectable magistrate has graced our humble city." Unimpressed, Vicker leaned in, narrowing his eyes. "I can't keep my promise if you don't take me seriously." Cindy sighed, annoyance clear on her face. "You're doing well enough, I suppose," she replied, though her tone was laced with sarcasm. Vicker's expression changed, a grin spreading across his face. He leaned in closer, grasping her chin to force her to meet his gaze. "What makes you think I'm doing well?" A cold sweat broke out on her forehead as she felt the weight of his stare. Releasing her chin, Vicker settled back into his chair. "Speak freely." Cindy clenched her teeth, her anger rising. "As a consul, you should understand that virtue is essential. Your laws might reduce street crime and enhance your reputation, but they will cause suffering and death for many. In the long run, that will only foster hatred and resentment among the populace." She locked eyes with him, her tone warning. "The Baskervilles won't accept you if you outshine their clan leader." Vicker absorbed her words, reflecting on the repercussions of his actions. "What should my next step be?" "Return your authority to the Baskerville clan, along with the glory from recent events," she suggested. "Let the clan leader take the credit. You should retreat to places like the Le Rouge at Lenoir Mountain or the Academy at the Empire's Center, where you can conceal your powers and shed your identity. The Baskerville clan leader will bear the consequences when the time comes." Vicker fell silent, contemplating her counsel. Suddenly, a surge of bloodlust swept through the cell, causing Cindy to shiver involuntarily. "It's like asking a hunting dog to turn on its master," he finally said, his voice laced with menace. He leaned closer, his bloodlust palpable, waiting for her reaction. Yet Cindy met his gaze with calm resolve. "It's the only way for you to escape the wrath of the Baskervilles." A faint smile tugged at Vicker's lips as he nodded. "I'll take your advice under consideration." Oddly enough, your ideas align closely with my own. To Cindy's surprise, Vicker unlocked her handcuffs, releasing her from her restraints. "Are you really letting me go?" Disbelief etched across her face. "I always keep my promises," he replied. Cindy stepped past him, a mix of hope and caution in her voice. "I hope you don't come to regret this day." Just as she was about to leave, Vicker called out, "You know of a clan called the Mesimadinaro?" He began narrating the tale of the Mesimadinaro clan. Most only recognize the 7 prominent clans in Underdog City, but the Mesimadinaro was the 8th. They were a prosperous merchant clan until tragedy struck. During a birthday celebration, the youngest son of the Mesamod Inaro clan showcased his new sword skills. Those skills, however, were the secret techniques of the Baskerville clan known only to their family. Cindy's brow furrowed in confusion. What does this story have to do with me? Undeterred, Vicar continued, the Baskervilles believed their secrets had been leaked. They unleashed their hunting dogs, leading to the extinction of the Mesamod Inaro clan. Yet puppet masters were at play. The young demons of the 7 clans had stolen those techniques and gifted them to the Mesamod Inaro child. Cindy forced a smile, her patience waning. What's your point? Despite the massacre, Vicar pressed on. There was a survivor girl taken at just 1 year old. She endured unspeakable horrors, all because of her beauty. The atrocities committed against her were too foul to recount. Cindy's anger flared, and she turned to leave. I don't want to hear this anymore. But Vicar's voice cut through her resolve. There's more. A new deputy consul was appointed, bringing the old crimes to light. He punished the 7 young masters who had committed those heinous acts. They were tortured and forced to confess their sins before they died. Their last words, I'm sorry for the crimes we committed. Cindy paused, turning back to him, tears streaming down her cheeks. Who were they apologizing to? Vicar met her gaze, calm but firm. To the young girl who went by the name Cindy Wendy Senrose, the sole survivor of the Mesamod Inaro clan. Her breath hitched as she processed his words. How can I believe you? You've tortured them. Vicar picked up a torch, his expression unyielding. The easiest way for you to believe me is to see for yourself. He led her to the prison cell where the 7 young masters had awaited their deaths. As they entered, Cindy gasped. The floor was stained with blood, and scrawled in crimson were their apologies. We were the ones who drove the Mesamod Inaro clan to devastation. Forgive us for our crimes. Panic surged through Cindy as she read their pleas for forgiveness, fear evident in their final moments. Overwhelmed, she felt her stomach churn, and suddenly, she vomited at the gruesome sight. Vicar stepped closer, his voice steady. Though they met a painful end, the vengeance of the Mesamod Inaro clan is not yet complete. There's still one more clan to deal with. He urged Cindy. You have every right to despise the Baskervilles, being a member of the Mesamod Inaro clan. Wiping her mouth, tears continued to fall as Cindy asked, why are you helping me? You're part of the Baskerville clan. Vicar smirked, his expression enigmatic. You're asking the wrong question. As Cindy got to her feet and began to walk away, she paused and turned back to Vicar. I see what you're trying to convey, she stated firmly. Then, using his full name, Vicar Van Baskerville, she added, I vow to repay this debt. With that, she turned and walked off, her voice resonating with determination. Regardless of what you do with your life from here on out, I will make sure you never have to worry about money again. Vicar observed her retreating figure, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. After a brief moment of reflection, he whispered to himself, I'll hold you to that promise. At that moment, Chihuahua burst into Vicar's private quarters, eager to let him know it was time to prepare for work. But as he swung open the door, his words caught in his throat at the sight before him. Vicar lay serenely asleep amid blood-stained sheets and lifeless bodies scattered throughout the room. Stretching and rubbing his eyes awake, Vicar greeted Chihuahua with a cheerful good morning. Chihuahua's eyes widened as he couldn't help but ask, what happened to all these bodies? Oh, I'm not really sure, Vicar replied nonchalantly, a mischievous grin on his face. It seems I might have taken them out in my sleep. Chihuahua was stunned, unable to believe it. Are you serious? Vicar chuckled, his tone playful. Just kidding. As they strolled down the hallway, Chihuahua probed into Vicar's childhood experiences. Vicar, teasingly, asked if Chihuahua didn't find his earlier joke amusing. It's not about whether the joke was amusing, Chihuahua clarified, still reeling from the morning's shocking scene. Vicar's expression shifted to one of contemplation as he recalled his recent troubles. I've been hit by poison arrows, ingested poison drinks 4 times, endured acid attacks, faced snipers, and even got run over by a cart. I've encountered all sorts of dangerous situations. Scratching his ear, he mused, am I attracting someone's attention? Chihuahua, feeling a bit overwhelmed, replied, "I thought you'd completely lost it." Vicar reflected on the abilities housed within Beelzebub, the sword summoned from his arm. He was impressed with the effectiveness of the tough life skill he had acquired during an illicit auction. Despite its risk rating, it had proven to be more powerful than he had anticipated. His 3 skill slots in Beelzebub were now occupied by Burn Injury Cerberus, Hemorrhage Hellhound, and Tough Life Hellish Buffalo. With the enhancements from River Styx and Tough Life, even Graduator-class assassins found it challenging to penetrate his skin. Though he was pleased with the strength of his skills, the relentless assassination attempts were beginning to wear on him. He understood that he needed to investigate and eliminate the threats to his life. Chihuahua nodded in agreement, backing his decision. Just then, they spotted a carriage approaching, its flag adorned with the Baskerville emblem. They exchanged astonished glances, realizing that the Baskervilles had arrived. Vicar's expression grew serious as he speculated, "They've likely been dispatched by the main family." As the carriage door swung open, a figure emerged, causing Chihuahua to break into a sweat beside Vicar. Standing at attention, he wondered if the newcomer was indeed who he thought it was. Meanwhile, Vicar maintained his composure, his gaze unwavering. The visitor turned out to be none other than the head butler, John Barrymore. "Vicar," the butler greeted with a smile. "It's been quite a while since we last met." Vicar reciprocated the greeting, praising the butler, "You look even more impressive now." John approached him with a playful tone, "You really think so? I always believed you would excel after leaving the main residence," he replied lightheartedly. From his vantage point, Chihuahua watched in awe, recognizing John Barrymore as the esteemed head butler of the Barrymore family, who had served the notoriously powerful Baskerville clan for generations. It felt surreal for him to be in the presence of his role model. Breaking the silence, Vicar inquired, "What brings you all the way here?" John's smile grew broader as he answered, "The Patriarch has commended your progress and has summoned you back to the main residence. He is quite pleased." Vicar was taken aback. "Hugo is happy." He struggled to envision the Patriarch wearing a smile. Meanwhile, Hugo, the Patriarch of the Baskerville clan, was engrossed in an article titled "The Most Beloved Figure Among the Underdog Citizens, Vicar." The piece highlighted Vicar's numerous achievements, most trusted by merchants, adored by farmers, respected by children and scholars, and notably, the most targeted by assassins. Lifting his gaze from the article, Hugo remarked, "The Baskervilles are recognized for their weapons, not their intellect. But with your deeds, we might shift that perception." He continued to praise Vicar, saying, "You've done exceptionally well." Vicar lowered his head humbly, placing a hand over his heart. "I've simply fulfilled my responsibilities." Still, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Hugo's expression didn't reflect true happiness. "The moment has arrived for rewards and consequences based on merit," Hugo stated, then proclaimed, "You will be attending the academy this year." Vicar remained composed, considering that this decision was anticipated. The academy he was set to join was the prestigious Colosio, celebrated as the finest in the empire, catering to the offspring of nobility and royal families. Students were required to stay in dormitories for their security. Vicar viewed this as a chance to enhance his skills while staying out of Hugo's watchful eye. Hugo continued by mentioning his intention to send a few others along with Vicar, though he hadn't yet decided who they would be. Vicar noted that he was closest to Highborough, Middleborough, and Lowborough, whom he internally labeled as his potential sandbags. Hugo agreed and suggested sending all 3 with him. Hugo then inquired if Vicar remembered the plan they had crafted when he was 8. Vicar guessed it referred to their training with the Morgs leveraging the ruby mines for the Morg family to handle the barbarians. With a smirk, Hugo confirmed that the plan had been successful, which led Vicar to seek further clarification. Hugo explained that the Morgs had proposed a joint raid and had humbly made their request. He then recommended that Vicar inspect the territory before starting at the academy to ensure that the laws he had modified were being followed. Hugo reassured him that it would be a worthwhile experience. Vicar nodded in agreement, stating he would comply with Hugo's instructions. As he and Chihuahua left the gates, Chihuahua waved goodbye, tears in his eyes, referring to Vicar as deputy consul and promising to manage the administrative tasks during his absence. Looking back, Vicar reflected on his farewell with his secretary.